Do you get your bagels toasted?
I do it and I get it scooped out.
What do you mean?
You can ask them to scoop out because I'm trying to cut the carb. I think Steph knows what I'm talking about. But it was my ex. My ex is the one that's always like, if you want to save on carbs, you ask them to scoop it. I'm like, what do you mean? They literally just scoop out.
They scoop out the bread of the bagel, so you just have the crust?
No, yeah, it's like the outer part, and then they just fill it in.
I have never even heard of that.
Yo, try it, man.
You've never been on a low carb diet, clearly.
I've been on a low carb diet my whole life. It's not working.
Welcome to The Worst Asian Podcast, where a couple of Asian American millennials give you our shitty opinions on all things Asian. My name is Lingjie, and I'm here with my co-host, Ben.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I almost forgot my name there for a second.
I think you almost forgot mine, too.
I was going to the intro, and I was like, I was halfway through. I was like, I forgot my name. Oh, God.
It's good seeing you, man.
It's probably because I haven't had any food yet. It's really early, and I haven't had any calories in me.
Speaking of calories.
Oh, there you go. Speaking of calories, we've got a guest on today. Back when we were college kids and very poor, we used to go to eater.com a lot to make all of our food decisions.
Our hardest life decisions.
Decisions, limited budget. I'm super excited for our guest today. If you consume calories or you eat food in general, unless you live on some homestead or you're a self-sufficient farmer in the middle of nowhere, then you have heard of eater.com.
Mm-hmm.
Joining us on the podcast today is the editor-in-chief and top eater over at eater.com.
Right.
Let's give it up for Stephanie Wu.
Woo!
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us today. For you, Stephanie, do you want to give a quick intro to our listeners on who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Stephanie. I'm the editor-in-chief of Eater. Just by quick introduction, I grew up in Taipei. I might be biased, but one of the best food cities in the world. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to New York for college, which I think, even if I weren't biased, I would say is one of the best food cities in the world. So somewhat luckily, I have had my fair share of living in cities with an abundance of choice, with, more food cultures than I could ever count, and have always, since I guess I was old enough to understand the idea and the power behind being able to choose what you're eating, and the privilege, of course, been incredibly lucky to live in these food destinations. I've worked in media for more than a decade. I've hopped around between print journalism, print magazines, digital media startups. I've always done lifestyle. My main focuses in my career have been food and travel, which of course are two incredible topics to be able to specialize in. I am, not surprisingly, the go-to for my friends when they are looking for a restaurant or they're looking for a destination to go to for fun or for their honeymoon. And, I would say this was true even before I took the job at Eater. So going to Eater felt like a really natural fit for me in that I've been a reader certainly for as long as I've lived in New York City. I am absolutely in the target audience of someone who cares deeply about what I eat, where I eat. I know that all of these decisions that we make on a daily basis are very defining in terms of who we are. And I'm absolutely, when the situation is right, the type of person who will never waste a meal. And in fact, will probably eat more than I should because I want to try everything. And I have such enthusiasm about understanding cultures through food and being able to then share that back to others. And so I also want to touch on what you were saying, Lingjie, about kind of like relying on Eater for recommendations. And I think that's so true. Like we've been so trusted for so long, but the idea of, it's more and more important to make a good decision, and having decision paralysis is something I'm so aware of. I don't know if you remember this website, this blog that used to be around in the, I want to say like mid 2000s called Midtown Lunch. I was obsessed with it.
Not off the top of my head, yeah.
I thought you were going to say Zanga.
It was essentially a blogger who collected every single food cart in Midtown and would post about kind of like where it was, what its menu was, how much things were. And this was kind of almost like before Twitter and before you could really like follow these establishments. And, as a unpaid intern in Midtown, I used this resource as my Bible, and I always wanted to try different food carts. This was back when you could easily get lunch in Midtown for under $8.
Oh, the days.
And you're just kind of like scrolling on this like crazy populated Google map. And I kind of loved that I lived and worked in a place where we had so much choice, but also when you've got hundreds of places in a 10-block radius, it is very hard to choose.
It's kind of like when you're on Netflix and you're just scrolling and you're like,
oh, yes.
Let's just keep scrolling.
You know, the funny thing about that comparison is Netflix has that button. Have you seen it? It's like, like just press the button and it gives you any random show of your choosing based on your history.
Yeah.
I could not imagine doing that with food. Just imagine there was some kind of button on Uber Eats where it was like, give me whatever, surprise me today.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the Netflix algorithm works, so I'm happy to let it recommend things, but
Would you press that button
to surprise me. No.
I was going to say.
I want to know what I'm getting into.
There you go.
Yeah, because watching something is a commitment.
Exactly.
I don't even like to eat food without like a menu where I know what I'm eating.
Oh. Going back to that small website, if that happened nowadays, they would be considered like a foodie influencer, social media kind of person.
Right.
You give them a TikTok account, you give them a Instagram account or something, or like a YouTuber. He could just make that into like a whole YouTube series.
A whole vlog thing, yeah, you're right.
I would follow a Midtown lunch TikTok. I don't work in Midtown anymore, but I feel like there's appeal there.
We joke about it, but I bet you someone is doing that already.
Oh yeah, for sure. Piggybacking on like, your love for food, does your love for like the excitement, did it ever die down, or does it something you're just doing, it just feels like, oh man, this is just work now?
Oh, food becomes work. That must suck.
That might be my biggest fear.
Yeah, because people look forward to a good meal, especially after a long day or something.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'll say that having previously been a travel editor, this is something that I did think about a lot in terms of travel as well, where you're on vacation, you're like, ooh, but I'm critiquing every aspect of this hotel and the service and, was everything smooth? And what if I want to write about this place? And so I have had lots of experience, trying to separate from my brain what I'm doing for fun, what I'm doing for work. And I think the biggest thing is to mainly accept that not every meal and not every experience will be perfect, and that's okay. I am the type of person who will have done their research, and so I think my chances more often than not are pretty good that I'll enjoy something. But that doesn't mean I won't, show up in a restaurant in a bad mood one day and be like, oh, this was slow or this was dirty or whatever it might be. I'm human like everyone else. But I will say what is one of my favorite things about Eater is that we have a very large team of people based in cities, in all the cities that we cover. And so, in New York City, which is my home, we have a team of critics, of writers, of editors, and it is actually in their job description to be out and about eating and trying things and staying on top of what's new and what the dining trends are. And I have this resource in that I can go to them and say, hey, have you been here yet? If not, I'm happy to be a guinea pig, but what did you love? What should I look out for? Is there a strategy for ordering on the menu? And so to me, I get to maintain that part of dining out for pleasure as opposed to having to review every meal that I eat or having to think about it through a work context. So I guess that's the good thing about being the boss is that you can pick and choose the parts of the job that you like and that you want to do. And, let those who have signed up for the job of dining out every day, dine out every day.
I'm not trying to say that's grunt work, but knowing that you're at the top of the food chain where you can have other people maybe tell you that this particular thing is not as good or you should go for A instead of B, that is a very, very good privilege.
It's like, I guess I have to eat this foie gras. Sure.
But hey, that's the same privilege Eater readers get, right? They read the site to see what our critics liked, what they didn't like, what our reporters are into. And we don't gatekeep this information. We're pretty open about our opinions. Right. And I might get early insight because I'm in, the company Slack rooms. But, certainly if we talk about a restaurant long enough or we talk about a certain dish or, a strategy for getting a reservation, we always just say put this on the site. People should know. There's no reason why we wouldn't want our readers to have the same intel we have.
I love that you're pretty much the plug, for all things restaurant.
Is Eater trying to expand to, I guess, more the adjacent cultures?
Yeah, I would say that. So the makeup of Eater is that we've got 25 city sites across the US, London, and Montreal. And then we have a national team that really looks at nationwide dining trends. They put together our travel packages. They put together our best new restaurants list, which is, countrywide as well. Yeah. And so I think what helps us stand out beyond anything else is that we have these local reporters, writers and editors on the ground who are covering their, local dining scene every single day. But their knowledge also is available to our national team who might say, we see this as a trend in New York and LA, but can we really say it's a trend if it's not also happening in Minneapolis or Detroit or Austin or whatever it might be, right? So when we say we're seeing a trend, it's because we actually hear it from people on the ground, and we have the authority to say this isn't just like some, New York or some West Coast thing. This is actually happening. We're getting reports. We're seeing it on the menu. We can track inflation in real time. Like that's one of the things that we have the ability to do that I think most food publications can't. They're not both highly authoritative in the local as well as, letting that information build up into the national, the global, the international, however you want to look at it. But the other big part of what our national team does is really focuses on the intersection between culture and food. So that to me is interesting, right? Because I do tend to think of things through a food angle. And when I see something like, I don't know, reality food shows and other TV shows that are, covering a similar industry. And so I think we really have that authority of being able to say like, hey, here's what's interesting about, this upcoming horror comedy film, The Menu, where like fine dining is presented in a scary setting, right? Like here's what we have to say about food collaborations or the way food is portrayed in some other, mainstream media that is not necessarily food first. And I think that's a really fun angle that we're able to take and kind of goes further in proving the point that, we're not just a food site. We're a food and culture site. Like food touches everything.
Can I ask you as a New Yorker, is it fair to say that we have the best pizza?
The pizza question.
Yeah.
At the risk of making my
I know you have to be politically correct, but
you have to be very careful. You have to tread very carefully, but Ben and I are lifelong New Yorkers.
Yes.
We have very biased opinions. My thoughts on Chicago deep dish pizza.
I never had that.
Will lose all our fans from that state.
I never had deep dish.
Uno's.
No, I never ate.
We have that
no,
here.
I didn't go with you guys.
You never been to Uno's?
I've known this since we were kids, so no, we never had. I never went with you guys.
Okay.
You brought your girlfriend at your time.
Not to say that Uno's is a good representation of authentic.
That's the best we got.
But that's the best we got here.
I was going to say, at the risk of pissing off my Chicago team and our Chicago readers, I am obviously, I wouldn't say biased, but I know the New York pizza scene much better than I know any other city's pizza scene. And I do think that what New York has in its favor is obviously distinct styles, but also variety, right? Like you can get deep dish here. Is it as good as Chicago deep dish? Probably not. But you can get Neapolitan slices, you can get crispy slices, you can get Detroit style, pan pizza, grandma style. Oh, yeah. All of those are represented here, and they're usually pretty good because you have to be decent to make it in this pizza town, right?
Exactly.
And so that we have going for us.
It's the same thing with bagels too. My friend, he's a doctor. He moved to San Fran. He's like, bro, I just want you to deliver me a dozen bagels right now if you can. I really miss bagels. I was like, it's not the same.
Do you get your bagels toasted?
Both
of you guys. Do you get your bagels toasted?
I do it and I get it scooped out.
What do you mean?
You can ask them to scoop out because I'm trying to cut the carb. I think Steph knows what I'm talking about. But it was my ex. My ex is the one that's always like, if you want to save on carbs, you ask them to scoop it. I'm like, what do you mean? They literally just scoop out.
They scoop out the bread of the bagel, so inside the crust.
No, yeah, it's like the outer part, and then they just fill it in pretty much like a hot dog. So
I have never even heard of that.
Yo, try it, man.
You've never been on a low carb diet, clearly.
I've been on a low carb diet my whole life. It's not working.
I do get my bagels toasted because I think it. 9 times out of 10, it has been sitting there for a while and needs to just be revived a little. If I'm going to a place where I know it's fresh, you don't need to toast my fresh bagel, but to be safe.
To be safe.
I have also, like, at times had my bagel scooped out, but I will say my hot tip when it comes to bagel sandwiches, because normally I hate a bagel sandwich because you've got everything like coming out of the sides because of how dense the bread is. So if I'm like at home, or honestly more likely at like my company cafeteria, back when my company had a cafeteria, or back when I worked at a company that had a cafeteria, what I would do is I would scoop out the bread so that the eggs fit in there. And then you don't have food spilling out the side of your sandwich, and you can still have a bagel sandwich that is like somewhat clean enough to eat at your desk.
I am shocked that I never thought about this life hack or pro food hack, whatever you want to call it. Because I'm picturing right now the fact that everything does kind of like smear out the side.
And it's just so doughy and big.
Yeah.
It's just, and then like it grazes your top of your mouth. You're like, oh man, both so good.
But you're like, you can't contain it. It gets in its wrapper. It's really messy. You got cream cheese everywhere.
Yeah, it's just all over your fingers. And like, I stuff mine. I put like, if I can afford it, I'll do the salmon, the lettuce, the capers, tomatoes.
Lox, and everything.
It's not even a bagel. It's literally a sandwich. It's like a hero at this point.
If I learned nothing else from today, I've learned this tip about scooping out the bagel. Both to save on calories and to make room for even more dense calories.
It's true. But the judgment is there, though. Like, people will really, look at you a certain way if you're like, I scoop out my bagel.
I have people looking at me. This guy got scooped out, and I'll look right in their eyes. I'm like, yeah, that's right, I did. What's up? So I don't care.
I don't know how we got onto this whole bagel topic. And
sorry, my bad. Clearly, I'm not the interviewer / moderator. That's why Lingjie is the one. I just talk.
We've got short attention spans, but I guess piggybacking on the fact that people nowadays have short attention spans, I had this more serious question for you. Either to me is a legacy food blog that still does good long form content. So for those that can read past a sentence, or for those that are looking for more than just a 10-second TikTok video.
Look what I found.
Like, how do you survive in a world where people like my co-host Ben are constantly losing their attention span, and it's getting shorter and shorter?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right in that attention spans are shorter, and there's more and more things kind of demanding our attention at all time, essentially. So like, you thought you wanted to read an article, but then you get a breaking news alert about something. You're like, oh, well, I got to go look at that. Or you get an email. But what I think is really important about all the various forms of storytelling that we do is that we really think about how are we telling the story in a way that services the reader? Because I think that's the key, right? You, of course, have your reader who just wants that one sentence, like straightforward. Tell me what's opening. Tell me when, where, and like how to get there and what to order,
up,
right?
thumbs down.
That's all you want.
Yeah.
You've got your reader who wants to like hear a little bit more about a movie like The Menu, where we can write about what it means to have a horror movie centered around fine dining and how the food came together, and, why it's okay to be uncomfortable when you're watching it. And like, we can write 3 different stories and people will read all of those. And then we've got, our video program, which produces documentary style short videos about the kind of behind the scenes of the restaurant. And we've got a huge YouTube following. We've got people who sit down and watch 10-minute, 15-minute videos.
I love
right. That is
videos.
Like the complete opposite of like, give me the TLDR and I want to move on. And so we think really deeply about, the story, what we're trying to say, the medium, and then we look at audience feedback. Like, if things aren't taking off, is there a reason why? Do people just say like, they're like, give me a map. That's all I want. Or are people like, no, I want the full 800-word review about the restaurant. And I think what's great about our readers is often they want more than just one thing, and they come to Eater because they know they'll get the map recommendations and the long form review, and they can see, what we consider to be the best new restaurants of the year.
I think it's really fascinating. Going back to about doing the videos and stuff, I love how it's like you learn about the chef, even just where to get the ingredients from. It's really, really key. Like, people really want to know that kind of stuff. It's beautifully shot, by the way, as well. When you
I also think that if you're doing like a profile on a restaurant or a chef or anything, there usually is enough content there to be distributed across different platforms. For instance, I just saw this thing on the YouTube channel where there was a old Hong Kong style bakery that was in Chicago. It was like the longest running one or something. I can see how that is a great 10, 15-minute video on YouTube. But at the same time, there are things within that where you can just clip it to make a, 30-second thing on Instagram, or then you can convert that into a full article for the actual website.
Right.
Exactly. And we're a media company. We're not trying to just like throw money around and like not use this smartly, right? So we very much, when we spend resources on a story, we figure out, okay, we've got the 10-minute version on YouTube. What's the social cut? What's, the eventual packaging on the website? And we think through these decisions. And what Ben was saying about kind of the interest in ingredients and vendors is actually a perfect example of looking at audience feedback and iterating from that. So YouTube has incredible analytics where you can, really see where people are clicking away from your video or if they're watching all the way, and what sections people rewatch, because people absolutely do rewatch just like certain sections.
Yeah.
And we saw us, when we were doing our most well-known series, which is called Mise en Place and goes behind the scene of fine dining restaurants. We saw an interest whenever you had ingredients on screen or a vendor showing up delivering an ingredient.
Exactly.
Maybe this is another series idea. And that's how our series Vendors came about. That's very focused on how the seafood is harvested and grown and gets to the restaurant, or, how Korean seaweed is harvested and all of that. And it's just interesting to see that our readers don't just care about the final product, but they also want to know how it got there.
Right. I think it's really beautiful how it ties in like an ecosystem and like how many moving parts are so essential for making things happen. Yeah, this is like a side bit, but I had one guest at a restaurant I used to work at. We ran out of salmon and then they got obsessed. Like, why can't you just go to Whole Foods right next door and get me the salmon? I'm like, I thought he was joking. I was like, sir, we can't. That's not how businesses work. And his wife is serious. I was like, oh my God, they're being dead ass serious right now. I was like, we have other options, but
you can't just go to Whole Foods and get the same quality.
Yeah, I was like, I thought it was a good joke. I was like, oh, that's funny, man. That's great. I was laughing. And the guy's like, I think he got more offended because I don't think he.
You didn't take him seriously.
I didn't take him seriously. I was like, oh, that's a good one, man. He was like, I'm being serious, bro. Give me salmon from Whole Foods. I was like, all right, yo.
So I guess videos like that can educate certain clientele like this. I do think people like seeing the curtain being pulled.
Yeah.
I consume a lot of YouTube. A lot of the stuff that I watch on YouTube is like behind the scenes stuff, or the day in the life of an X and Y person, or
BTS,
this creative or something like that.
You know what's great about it too is when you're watching it, you really get to see the chefs, like the method, why they're doing it, and you get to actually see them preparing it. It's like this is the day and day time where they have to do prep work, right? Like you're talking about the mise en place, like you have to get it ready, and it's just a nice thing for people to hopefully understand and appreciate food more, which I think your platform does provide.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I don't know about you too, but I'm very easily influenced. So I'll watch, an old school Chinese bakery in Chicago, and I'm like, I need that. I need to go and eat that. And I'll make reservations at a place that we do a video at. And then obviously when I'm eating at that place, I'm like, oh, I have so much more appreciation because I know that, the chefs have been working on this recipe for like 72 hours and it wasn't just something that was slapped together, but I have a visual understanding of the process, which makes me appreciate it even more.
Can I ask you a question? Given your status in the food scene, is it easy for you to get a reservation at places that normal human beings like Ben and I struggle to get to?
Listen, I am just like everyone else. I set
reminders
on my calendar. What did I do most recently?
She has a card. She has a card, like a badge.
Was making a reservation for somewhere in Paris, and like the reservations were available like some regular local time, but it was like 3 a.m. New York time, and I truly like set an alarm for 2:58 a.m. Woke up, booked it, and then went back to sleep.
The problem there is you don't have a Paris branch. Do you have a Paris branch yet of the company?
We do not
right?
have a Paris
See, there you go.
branch.
If you did, someone on staff himself woken up at 3 a.m. for you.
Steph, I like how Steph pretty much did what you do on Black Friday. It's like, all right, I got to get to the store at 4 in the morning, get a tent and a nice lawn chair with like my thermos.
I mean, it helps when you get to stay in bed the whole time. But I would say like, I appreciate that certain things are still democratic, and pulling a string is like literally the last thing I ever want to do unless it's like my mother's I don't know, big birthday and it's the only thing she would ever want, then like, okay, I might try and exhaust every resource to like get a thing that someone really wants. But generally speaking, like, you know, I'm not the type of person to be like, I'm so-and-so, get me a table. And I don't think that's the impression of eater editors and writers that we want out there either. Whenever we can, we book reservations like everyone else. We're incognito. We're not trying to use our authority in a way that might reflect badly on our expertise, frankly, because I do think the relationship changes if you are having every meal for free and, you know, and money doesn't matter when you're dining out, because then you can't have an accurate evaluation of is something worth it and should a regular person be spending their money on it.
Stephanie, you painted it so perfectly, because main thing about that is you're saying like, I want to be treated like a normal guest, because that way you know what's the real experience. But when these foodies come,
internet foodies, or let's say critics.
No, like foodies. Now, I'm not talking like, I know like Pete Wells, New York Times, like he's a critic.
Yeah, but people also know exactly what he looks like. So when he walks through the door.
Just FYI, I'm putting him on blast, but apparently we saw him recently. He looks like the Big Lebowski now. Like that, everyone has the same stock picture of the dude. You know what I'm talking about?
Like 20-year-old picture.
Yes. I'm like, yo, they don't update that. And we saw him, was like, oh my God, you look like the Big Lebowski. Just a lot of hair.
You said this to him?
No, hell no, bro. No way, man. I said, you look good, bro. That's what I told him. I was like, you look great. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want it to be free, because it matters how much, you know, you're spending for something, because that's how you really know, is it worth getting this dish?
Yeah, plus the treatment, because you are bound to get better treatment. Yeah. You are bound to give someone that is going to have a very influential effect on your business much better treatment than you would like the average random person that's just coming there.
Right.
Not to say that you would give that average person bad service, but you would just give the other person much, much better.
And then all of a sudden you have all the managers come by, like, and then all the other tables are like, is that some kind of celebrity? What's going on there? And then it's like, no, they're a foodie. And so, you know, I love that you're just trying to keep it grounded, because you want to give the most real, unbiased experience as possible.
Yeah. And I do think that's a journalist's approach, right? You want to try and fly under the radar when you can, and you're never going to lie about who you are. Like if somebody said to me like, hey, do you work at Eater? Of course I would say, yes, I do. I'm never going to lie and say I'm someone else. But I would, you know, much rather like, you know, they send one dish out of the kitchen because they want to, you know, let me know that they know I'm there, as opposed to like, this was free and here's like rounds and rounds of drinks and this and that. It just is like, I feel like I personally appreciate the value of what goes into making a restaurant meal and the front of house and the back of house. And if you're just giving everything away for free, then you're obviously cutting into your own bottom line. And so if I'm going somewhere, it's because I am very ready and willing to pay for it.
By the way, when you do go, and I noticed this, the restaurant I worked at experienced this, but we had this one guest by himself, and he had a book out, a little notepad with a pen, and every time he was eating, you know, and we were thinking, is he a food critic? You know, but you don't know. But what happens is because psychologically now, you
try to treat them better, just in case.
Yes. And then like the manager's like, how is everything? How are you? Where are you from? Oh my God, I love your glasses.
And then it turns out the guy's just doing his taxes.
Yeah. He's just doodling. You know, he's doing Sudoku and stuff. Yeah. So
it's great to hear that you would rather not get treated like that. I want to give a quick disclaimer to the listeners in the restaurant industry. If you see Ben and I, we will take all the free drinks. You know,
yes.
We do not have the same mindset as Stephanie.
Bring it on.
Give us all the free drinks.
And we're going to be like, we're best friends with Stephanie.
They're going to be like, who? Good luck with that. But no, I think that's kind of the, I don't know what you want to call it, double-edged sword of Yelp, right? Everyone's a critic. Yes. Everyone's got a voice. Everyone's got a platform. And it's up to us as consumers, as diners, as people who love food to decide on our own how much weight you want to give to a professionally written food review versus a Yelp review versus a TikTok review. And like, I'm the kind of person who will look at all of these things before I make a decision, but certainly I personally put more weight in one thing versus another because I take with a grain of salt, okay, you know, how did this person's experience come about? And just because everyone has a voice doesn't mean they're doing the responsible thing with it.
I think what separates you from the rest is that you try to paint it in a more like artful way instead of like when people do food content, it's like a dopamine rush, you know? It's like, oh, make it flashy, you know, like make it extravagant, make it as, you know, make it look crazy.
Yeah.
And to your point about kind of like the enjoyment of food, you know, when you work in food, I actually think the biggest impact that we don't really talk about has been Instagram and this need for people who don't work in food, right? To still want to document everything and have an opinion and say like, I went here, I ate this, and I'm very guilty of that even before I worked in food media. It's just like wanting to say that like, hey, I had this meal and here's how I felt about it. And so that to me felt like more work, if it makes sense, than my actual job. And so these days I'm very much trying to say like, okay, I want to share with people what I love. And I know that people, follow my Instagram or whatever it is because they want to see where I'm eating. But if I am like in a food coma and need to go to bed after a meal, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm not going to like go back and look at the menu and post like all 10 courses or whatever it is.
I follow your Instagram. Aside from having a very cute son, you do eat a lot of good-looking food. Yeah. And I get very, very, very jealous sometimes.
It's because the bad-looking food doesn't get posted. Doesn't mean it's not delicious, but like, what's a good-looking food versus a bad
aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, exactly. I'll get back to the basics just for a very quick second. Maybe not all the listeners actually know what the editor-in-chief does on a day-to-day basis. You don't just consume the most food. That's not how things work.
I will say this is maybe extra confusing because there is another Stephanie Wu out there who is a competitive eater. And she's like she's my number one SEO competition. It is actually her job to eat the most, and it is not my job to eat the most.
I was thinking about like Joey Chestnut. I was thinking that this whole time, like
it is that, yeah.
Oh damn, yo, bro! Just shout out to the other stuff, yo.
The other Stephanie Wu, yes. But so my day to day does not involve eating as many hot dogs as possible at any given time because I would be very bad at that. I would say the reason why I went into journalism and the reason why I love it is, maybe this is really boring, but the truth is every single day is different. And so one day I could be writing my newsletter, or I might be working directly with a writer on a story, or I might be doing like much more like corporate, like managing things, like looking at our annual goals and setting priorities for the team, So I think first and foremost, journalism is often portrayed as very glamorous in like movies and TV shows, right?
Yeah.
And like that's maybe because the reality is that our days are very boring and most editors actually have desk jobs and are not like running around doing all the things. So unfortunately, I have to like pull the curtain back a little bit here too and say 75% of my time, it is a desk job, and I'm thinking about everything from how our video is performing to what are some fun new concepts we might want to do on social video. But, the fun part of a desk job, because there can be one, is that I work with a huge team of people who care so deeply about food as much as I do, if not more. And so there's never a boring day on Eater Slack. Like there's always something for us to talk about.
I can't imagine what your Slack looks like. Does it get confusing? Because you've got, 25-ish cities?
Yeah.
And then you have the YouTube channel and probably countless social media things.
Just the writing too.
Yeah, like how do you deal with all that?
Well, so luckily I, of course, have a team of direct reports under me who oversee each specific team. And they're the, I would say, like, I guess, subject area experts, right? So my video lead, my executive producer is our video expert. He knows 3,000 times more about video than I ever would. And if he's ever coming to me about something, it's because he wants the average video viewer's opinion and not because he wants me to weigh in on like lighting or color or pacing or anything like that. But yeah, like having a strong team of experts and really making sure that you are learning from the people who work for you is so important to me. It should never just be that I say a thing and it goes. Like usually if I have to make a decision, it's because I've already asked everyone else who I think is an expert and they weren't able to make decisions. So then I'm weighing in with what might be a different perspective. But I think the simplest way to think about the job of an editor-in-chief is that I spend part of my time managing people and then I spend part of my time managing the journalism. That's not to say there isn't a lot of like administrative, corporate, other stuff in between, but those are my like two North Stars. Is I want to make sure my team knows what they're doing. They're happy. They're, they have a mission in mind when they go out and eat or write or shoot video or whatever it is. And I want to make sure that our journalism, has a clear goal and everyone knows what they're working toward, which I think the easiest way to sum up is provide reader service as well as entertain and delight.
It's hard to imagine what the world would look like if there wasn't digital media services like Eater or things of that nature. Try to picture in your adult life or maybe even
Oh my God. I got it right now. Do you remember TV Guide?
Yes, I remember TV
Those little
Guide.
books?
Yes.
There's going to be a book. It's like food guide. Okay, in Fear and Queens.
There probably were guides like that, I would say.
Damn, I thought I had a good idea.
But they get out of date easily, right? I think that's the thing is that in a place like New York, when I think actually was talking to my New York editor the other day, she was like, there are 23 restaurant openings this week. We can't cover all of them.
That's crazy.
And nor should you. Nobody needs to read 23 different opening stories.
It's all food, yeah.
A side note, did you guys used to have a podcast? Did Eater used to have one?
Yes. The former editor-in-chief, Amanda Clute, who is our publisher and my boss, used to do a podcast called Eater's Digest with a video producer, Dan Janine.
Oh, yeah. I swear I remember seeing long-form conversations from Eater somewhere because I've been consuming podcasts my entire life since they were called radio.
Without the dial. By the way, my dad still to this day, he doesn't know what a podcast is. I'm like, I'm doing radio, Dad. Oh, okay, son. Have fun with your radio show. I'm like, oh my God.
It's okay. My mom has no idea what I do. I mean, she knows I'm the editor-in-chief of Eater, but it's what does Stephanie do every day? She's like, she wouldn't know. She's in meetings all day, basically.
One thing I do want to touch on, and I'm very surprised when I found this out, that you guys have never published an actual book before, but you've got a new thing coming up, right?
Yes, that's right. We just announced the book deal that we've been working on for quite some time. We're working with a publisher called Abrams, which is known for its beautiful coffee table books. So I'm really excited for how these will look. But we're going to be publishing 3 cookbooks and 4 travel guides with them, which really, again, combines my interest of food and travel. And so I'm thrilled about that. And I think going into books is exciting because rarely do you see digital brands move toward print. It's usually the other way around. But I think Eater has made enough of a name for itself that if you see an Eater book at a bookstore, in an airport, on a Kindle, wherever you get your books, there will be some level of interest in I wonder what Eater has to say about X thing. And so we're excited for this. As digital first people, we're very aware that, we were just talking about food guides. Travel guides get out of date very quickly.
Yeah.
And the one thing we really want to do is make sure that there are QR codes and things in the books so that if you are ever looking at something, you can also go straight to our site where, of course, will be the latest and most updated maps. And you can kind of say, okay, there's the essential, iconic New York restaurants. But if I do this QR code, I can also see the latest and the greatest and what's the most up to date.
Yo, stuff is living in 2030, bro. I like that. The QR code, that's just right.
Pretty smart.
That's I was like,
yeah. And you said, is there a tentative date or period when these books are going to launch?
Yeah, the first one will come out next year. We're working hard on it.
Fantastic. I want to touch base a little bit about your own personal heritage and as relates to a lot of our listeners who are Asian American. Sometimes when people that are in the Asian American diaspora, like Ben and I, and the stuff that we cover, and we look at someone like you, would you rather just be known as Stephanie Wu, editor-in-chief, instead of, Stephanie Wu, the first Asian editor-in-chief? How do you take that?
I really think that to me, it's one and the same, just because being Asian American and being Taiwanese American is so intrinsically tied to my identity that I could, personally never separate it. And so to me, it's the same thing. And, I've heard many times from others that it's great to be the first, but you never want to be the only. And that is what I really kind of hold near and dear is, yes, I'm thrilled to be the first anything, but usually it's later than you would like. And in that sense, it's my goal to make sure I am not the only and that I'm doing everything I can to cultivate talent from, other underrepresented groups in media, generally speaking, and that I'm paving the way for a second and a third and a fourth, whatever it might be, because that's so much more important to me than just being the first anything.
I like that. I guess with the whole movement now with Asian cuisine and amazing Asian chefs and stuff, is there anything that like really stands out to you? Look forward to that you think it's going to be in the future as well?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I'll be frank, I don't know if this is because we live in New York City and it's,
Right.
Again, a city that is very receptive to different cultures and cuisines and regional things. But what I'm really, really, really liking is this move toward restaurants that have a story to tell and diners being really receptive to what that story is. And it's not just like, okay, I'm making Southern Italian food and it's not just all pasta all the time, but we're actually like teaching you something about, a very specific regional thing. But I just think that, you're seeing restaurants like the Maka and Sema, and they're like, the name of their group, in fact, is unapologetically Indian. And their whole goal is to showcase lesser known regional Indian food. Mm-hmm. Go beyond the butter chicken, go beyond the biryani, and like what is there that where you can learn something throughout the course of your meal. And I think it's so fantastic that diners are more and more receptive, not just to dishes they haven't seen before, but the actual stories that the chefs want to tell. And I think we're moving away from, what we used to think of as like a quote unquote Asian restaurant, which would have Chinese food, but also have pad thai and maybe some sushi on the menu. And it was like, you can get whatever you want here. And more toward chefs saying like, this is the type of food I either grew up with or I feel strongly about and I want to put out in the world. And I don't, I'm less concerned with being considered authentic or whatever it might be. And I'm just more concerned with telling my own story.
Speaking of like telling your own story, being Taiwanese descent and stuff, do you feel like sometimes that plays a part in your role as being, editor-in-chief in terms of like what you want?
That's a tough question because, like how Janet Yang, when she was nominated as the first Asian American president of the Academy of Motion Pictures. I always get the name messed up.
I was just going to say Academy Awards. But
Oscars, whatever. Yeah. When she got nominated there, there was some whispers as to, now she has an agenda of some sort, which is not necessarily the case.
Do you ever feel like that? Like, does that play a part sometimes where people say?
I think that I'm open about my, obviously, identity, and I'm also open when I'm biased or I feel like I, want to raise something up because I love it so much. But I think it always comes to that caveat of like, oh, I'm Taiwanese American. So, when I eat at a Taiwanese restaurant, I might know a little bit more than your average diner. But I think that being said, the part of my identity that I bring to my job on a daily basis when thinking about the storytelling and the news lens is really that I got into this job because I love the fact that I basically get to like learn things every day and like without sounding incredibly nerdy, like I get to study a different thing and like get really deep into it and it's for work and I can learn something new every day. And to me, it doesn't matter if I'm learning more about someone else's culture, if I'm learning about Indian American culture versus if I'm learning about Taiwanese American culture, because I think there's so much more I can learn about Taiwanese identity too, and my Taiwanese identity is not the same as someone else's Taiwanese identity. And so I will always want to learn more about other Taiwanese Americans who are kind of in the center stage, and I'll always like cheerlead for that, but also am aware that there's so much more for me to learn and for our readers to learn that's out there too, and that is just as important.
Yeah, because sometimes there is no need to try to
force or try to
force something to go in a certain way. Like recently, Ida put out this whole thing about the best fried chicken in America. It was a very extensive, very good article, and I was glad to see that there was good mention of Korean fried chicken, of course, and there's mention of like Taiwanese popcorn chicken. There's like tons of different things, and I'm sure that was not forced. That just happens to be what is considered good fried chicken in America, in addition to the traditional types of fried chicken.
I'm getting hungry, but I just gotta ask, for Flushing, there used to be a spot called, remember Corner 66 that served Taiwanese food? I gotta know, I missed a Taiwanese pork chop dish.
Stephanie, this is a very, very specific question he's asking.
I know, I'm not, this is so not professional. I need to know a place where I can get that again.
It was the best pai gu fan that we've ever had, the best pork chop rice that we've ever had. We used to eat it as a kid. Me and people that eat that have never been able to find a replacement of it.
Can you make like a top go-to spot just for that one dish?
Just for a pai gu fan.
Yes, please.
I definitely can't. I definitely don't know Flushing as well as you guys do, but I will say when I have that craving, which I obviously do, I go to Taiwan Pork Chop House in Chinatown in Manhattan. And I think they do a pretty good job.
That's literally that's just a translation of the actual dish.
I mean, that's
right there.
SEO purposes, that's great because if you want Chinese pork chop and you search that, that place is going to pop up.
It's like, yo, where do you want to get donuts? Let me type in donut store. Yo, there's one.
This place called Donut Store.
I totally ran the momentum there for a second. Let me go
This is a tough question. Are there any dishes, restaurants, chefs recently that's on your mind in terms of stuff that you've been wowed by?
Yeah. The one that's coming top of mind right now, and not just because we're on this podcast, but it's called OEG Me, and it is like a slightly fancier restaurant from the team behind OEG, which is a Korean restaurant in the East Village that just closed.
Yeah.
But so it's like a coursed menu, so it's like 4 courses, and you get to pick each one. But some of the dishes were just so interesting to me. And I would say, like, I'm no Korean food expert, but I think I know the flavors pretty well. And this to me was kind of flavors presented in a way that felt utterly Korean, but still, incredibly creative and new and different. And so one of my favorite dishes from that night was this cold lobster chili ramyun, which was like a tiny portion because it's like a tasting menu, but it was like perfectly chewy noodles and like the right temperature because like you can't just have, cold noodles, right? It has to be like a little bit like room temp, but still feel soothing and warm. Cooling.
Yeah. Right.
And then just like meaty lobster and spice. And I was like, oh, this is like one of my top bites of the year, basically.
Oh, really?
That's interesting because Korean cuisine doesn't really incorporate enough lobster. But I know you're talking about from OEG. Yes, you're right about that. They do make some really nice. It's like modern contemporary Korean cuisine.
Have you had any good things recently, Ben?
I had a Whopper Jr. at Burger King, and they put the bun perfectly on top of the meat. So yes, that's my.
Recently, I went to Eric Tsai's place, Wen in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
and I got that. I always butcher the letters. BDSM chicken. Is that the right order of
BDSM?
Yeah.
That's why I was asking about the reservation thing, because in order for me as a peasant to secure this chicken, which is limited to 5 chickens per day.
Oh, you were telling me about this.
5 orders per day. I had to make a reservation on the weekday, on the Tuesday, and then I had to go there with my wife half an hour earlier, and then my wife sat in the nice warm car. I waited physically outside in front of the restaurant, and I was like, no one else is going to wait online. And then the door opens, I go in, and before I'm seated, I'm like, I'm really sorry to do this. Can you put in the order for the chicken for me right now?
Listen, I have done this. I obviously have been to Wen, love it, one of my favorite new restaurants of the year. But this is a perfect example of sometimes you just can't pull a string because Eric and I are friends. We actually went to the same high school, even though we're several years apart. And when I made my reservation, I was like, okay, like I really, want to get the chicken. He's like, okay, but we don't reserve it. So just make sure you have an early reservation so you can get it. And I was like, okay, no problem. I got a 5:15 p.m. reservation. He's like, no, like you need a 5 o'clock reservation. Like go on Resi and change it if you want the chicken. And I was like, yes, chef. Like I'll do whatever.
Yes, chef.
I get to the restaurant at like 4:45, like a good Asian who's like following rules and doing whatever they can to get that like coveted dish. And Eric is in the restaurant. I'm like saying hi, and I'm like, can you put in my chicken order though?
Like, yo, let's get to business.
Yeah.
Even when you're in charge of either, you have to jump through hoops just to get this chicken.
No, he's a fair, democratic person.
I remember Lingjie, literally, he was talking to us in the group chat. He's like, yo, I'm just waiting right now. He sent, the pinpoint of his location. And we're like, are you really waiting? He's like, yep, that's me.
But it was worth it, right?
It was good. But don't go with 2 people and order that chicken and then 3 other dishes.
Yeah.
I can eat a lot of food, but that was way too much chicken.
It was just too much.
It was just too much chicken for me. The nice thing was we had a table next to us who came a couple minutes late and they tried to order and then they couldn't get there. So when I realized this was way too much chicken, I turned around and said, hey, do you guys want to take a couple pieces off my thing? Because I know you want this.
That's really nice of you.
They were nice enough to buy us dessert afterwards.
Oh, nice. I like that.
That's a nice story.
It's like a little double date all of a sudden. Like an impromptu double date.
Let's get to our favorite segment of the whole podcast.
Yeah.
We do this segment on every single episode where Ben and I and the guest take... Oh, hold on a sec. I have to plug in the power. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Don't...
You're afraid this is gonna die and we're gonna lose everything, aren't you?
I'm afraid too.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
I can't recreate this magic, you know.
I can't recreate this magic. Oh shoot.
Okay, let's get on to our favorite segment of the whole podcast. It's called Ranting and Raving. We do this on every single podcast. Me, Ben, and the guest take a couple of minutes just to rant or bitch or whatever, vent about something crappy in our lives.
Yeah.
I'm going to start this off since we're in the...
No. Is it not plugged in? Yo, that was crazy. I was like...
Okay.
The suspense. What's he going to say?
Yeah, that was too much suspense.
Someone give Jeff Gordon a call. Tell him I put the tires on, but I forgot to pump air into it.
You forgot the nuts in there.
I did 99.9% of my job.
All right, take 3 and action.
Getting on to our favorite segment of the whole podcast for our third time, ranting and raving. I originally had a rant for this, but I'm going to rant about something new.
The laptop?
Laptop battery technology. Why is it that we're in 2022, even expensive laptops have crappy battery? That's my really quick mini rant that I had to top on. My actual rant is, you ever been to a restaurant and it's time to get the check?
Oh.
I feel like I need to grab a giant white flag and just like wave it across.
Yes.
It coincidentally is always when you want to get the check and leave. I just can't get their attention.
This sounds like a rant about me. Other people that are in the industry think I'm like, this freaking jackass is fucking spilling the beans and shit. But pretty much it's like, all right, we paid, we put the check. Now we can afford more time to do other things in terms of like the other guests.
Oh, so my table's finishing up and
we know. We're not doing this. It's just they're like, we'll get to it when we can. So yeah, I apologize.
We should all switch to the Korean thing where they have a freaking button at your desk.
I was saying that like every restaurant should.
How about you, Ben? You have anything to rant about?
So I'm left-handed. I have been writing the notes now because I have to like study the menu, whatever. But I forgot, since I'm lefty, us left-handed people tend to smear what we're writing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because of the direction that we're taught. And I was just thinking about the episode of The Simpsons where, I don't know if you remember, Ned Flanders, I think, made a lefty store. In the mall. So everything in the store was left-handed. like there was like a left-handed scissor.
Isn't it the same scissor?
It is.
No, it's backward, isn't it? My husband is left-handed. He has very strong feelings about this.
So
because you know how like one hole is slightly smaller than the other, and it's like just flipped. You can't just turn a scissor upside down. That's not how it works.
Oh, you know what? It's because I never actually try to like motion with my right hand.
Wait, so do you use the scissors with your dominant hand or your...
I still do it with my left,
with the left hand.
I just, but...
It's because the blades are cutting the wrong way.
Yes. Thank you, chef. Yeah, chef.
I was going to say, I will bring your story into food as well because my husband is left-handed and it's his biggest pet peeve. When like he's sitting at a restaurant with someone and it's the wrong side and their left arm and right arm are like up against each other. But we went to a restaurant once. I wish I could remember where it was.
Yeah.
Where the waitstaff noticed that he was left-handed and they moved his utensils to the other side because they were like, it's like the kind of meal where like you bring new utensils for every course or whatever. Yes. And it was like, he was so touched. He was like, they noticed and they did this for me because I'm left-handed and that's like the best service I've ever got.
So sometimes I will do that because I don't know what it is, but when you're lefty, you notice it.
You notice it for your diners.
Yeah, like I notice who's left-handed. I don't know why. It's just I pick up on it. I'm like, oh, you're left-handed. And I say too, like it could be a complete stranger. Like, he's like reading a newspaper, flips it. I don't know. Like, oh, you're left-handed? And he's like, who the hell are you? Are you a Jehovah's Witness? Like, and then they just like freak out. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's it. Bye. That is a nice touch.
Yeah. Lingjie, to your story, dining with a toddler means that like you never know when they're going to explode. And so our new thing is when that last dish hits the table, we're like, bring the check whenever you want. And so like, then you're like, it's a ticking time bomb and like you've started the timer. So you get the check as soon as you can. And even if you're sitting there, they don't care, right? They know you still have food on your table.
They don't.
So then you get that check taken care of so that whenever you need to leave, you can just like stand up and go and you don't have to do the like, hey, like, get me out of here.
I'm going to start breakdancing to get their attention. But your point is true. Because my son is 4 years old right now and dining with my family before we had a kid versus life right now. Logistically, It is much more difficult. I feel like I'm going camping sometimes when I go to a restaurant. We don't give our kid a screen time, like on the phone and stuff. So I'm literally bringing his toy chest in my book bag.
Oh, that's true. You're right. You always bring stuff.
And God forbid, if it's a restaurant with a small table,
Oh, it's a mess.
like I don't know what to do.
And also, that is our worst nightmare when
Kids?
guests bring their kids. I'm
That's
like,
your worst nightmare.
because I'm like, oh, this floor is destroyed. It's just, I'm like, and every day I have like a bad back. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be picking a lot of stuff up this kid drops. Nope, I already know this.
On the flip side, that's why I love going out to a restaurant. I'm like, drop all the food you want. It's not my house. I don't have to Roomba immediately.
That is true. We become your babysitters. You parents, you don't give a F about it. You're like,
Yo, I care.
no, you don't. They like, it's like, yo, your son just threw a whole bowl of edamame on the floor. Do you know that? Oh, isn't it? He's adorable, isn't he? I'm like, wow. Like,
Okay, I wouldn't let my son waste food like that because that's a no-no.
What Stephanie would do is she would tell her son, please eat the
peas, I
eat the
guess.
piece,
Whatever.
and then you can throw the whole
Yes.
thing onto the floor.
Shells can go on the floor.
Then let Ben go pick it up with the whole staff. Yes, it's fine.
Okay,
Good times.
mine is a rant and a rave, I will say.
Nice.
So I'm going home to Taiwan for Christmas, taking
Nice.
my son and my husband, and he is at an age where he will not sit still on me. He won't sit on me, and so
Are you talking about your husband or your son?
my son. I don't think my husband would sit still on me either. That sounds really uncomfortable. But so even though he is not 2 years old yet, we have decided that he will have his own seat for a 16-hour flight back
That is
to
Smart.
Taipei.
Smart.
And unfortunately, the airline does not allow you to book that because you have to put in a passenger's birth date when you're booking a ticket, right?
Yeah.
So I'm putting in his birth date. I'm trying to buy him a seat. And they're like, oh, he's under the age of 2. You can't book him a seat.
Huh.
And so the only way to do this is to book our own seats, call them, go through the whole customer service thing and say this is what we're trying to do. And my husband is doing this because I was on a work trip. And he's like, the customer service representative doesn't understand why you would want to pay for a seat when you don't have to.
Yeah.
She has never been on a...
Guarantee she is not a parent.
that your husband was talking to me, I think. I'm pretty sure. Because I didn't know that. All this you're saying, I'm like, now I need to know when I have a kid. It's like, oh, crap.
So did you get the problem?
We got it resolved. He's going to have his own very fancy seat.
Wow.
And hopefully we'll sleep for part of the 16 hours so that I can sleep for part of the 16 hours.
It's a long flight, yeah.
But I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm obviously dreading this very long flight now that he's walking and active and is going to want to run up and down the aisles. But it will all be worth it because obviously we're going home where I will have many more pairs of hands helping out. And we will be able to eat Taiwanese food and my son will be able to have more Taiwanese food that he enjoys. And so it's
That's
all in the
great.
name of getting some Taiwanese breakfast and eating what I think is the best food available. And so that's my light at the end of a tunnel is a Taiwanese soy milk cruller sandwich.
Oh, yes. Stephanie, great conversation. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun talking about everything. I am so glad to hear that you don't take all the free drinks when you go to a restaurant.
I'll leave some for you guys.
That's all you care about. Not the food, the drinks, this guy.
If the listeners want to connect with everything you're doing or what the company's doing, where can they find you on the interwebs?
So you can follow me at by Steph Wu on both Instagram and Twitter, if Twitter is still around when this podcast comes
Shout out to the GOAT, Elon Musk.
Yo, that is a real question. In 2-3 weeks, we don't know if that thing will be there.
If it's there, I'll be there.
Tentatively, TBD.
And you can follow Eater's national accounts at Eater or all of our city accounts. Very easy to find.
Amazing, amazing. And stay tuned next year. They'll have the books coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys are ever looking to relaunch that podcast, you have 2 volunteers right here.
Amazing.
Where we just eat and don't talk.
Yeah,
We're just eating and not talking.
it's basically mukbang ASMR
Yeah, it's
for
like
an hour.
eating those Taiwanese pork chops.
You don't need Eater to do that. You could just do that on your own.
Oh, it's just eating now. That's all it's called. Not eater, it's just eating. Yeah.
If you guys want to stay up to date with Ben and I do on a daily basis, follow us on all the social medias at Workstation Pod, even on Twitter for now, apparently.
Yes. Free speech is a thing.
On behalf of Ben, Stephanie, catch you guys next week. See ya.
Bye.